Good morning. Good morning. Yes, Kenya has entered the Zoom room. Whoop, whoop. Good morning, Kenya.
Morning.
Thank you, everyone, for coming to CEO School. This is the original classroom on Fanbase. You know, when you come here, you need to have a pen and paper because you are going to learn something. A little bit about me. My name is Lainika Johnson. I am the CEO of Trashlogic. We are a national trash management company servicing multifamily and commercial properties. The reason that I started CEO School a few years ago, well before Fanbase, was because I started my company. We grew really fast. When we reached the $1 million mark pretty quickly within the first 6 months, I realized that I didn't know how to run a company. I just knew how to start a company. So I went back to school. I went to UCLA Anderson and I took their entrepreneurship program, and that is where I learned to become a CEO. And at that point, I realized that in order for me to really create space in my life for all of this information I learned, I needed to teach it. So I started CEO School about 2 years ago, and then I recently brought it to Fanbase every Friday. All right, y'all. So we are going to get started with CEO School because we have a lot to talk about, and we have Kenya Young here. This is a real treat, you guys. I am so excited to welcome Kenya Young to the Fanbase stage. She is an incredible woman, wife, mother, friend. But let me tell you about Kenya from a professional standpoint. Kenya Young is the managing editor for collaborative journalism at NPR. In this role, she grows and supports NPR's collaborative journalism by fostering member station relationships. You know, all those stations that run NPR programming in your local city and town. And she helps run NPR's day-to-day news operations. Previously, she was the executive producer of Morning Edition. In that role, she was responsible for the day-to-day running of the show and leading Morning Edition through one of the most demanding news cycles in history. During her time at NPR, Kenya has been the executive producer of All Things Considered on the weekends and the supervising editor of Morning Edition. She has also served as an editor and producer for several NPR programs, including News and Notes, Day to Day, Tell Me More, and Talk of the Nation. Young started at NPR in the California Bureau as an intern in 2007. In addition to show production, she has been a part of special coverage teams during the 2008 and 2012 elections, the 10th anniversary of September 11th attacks, and live coverage of the Sandy Hook school shootings and the Boston Marathon bombing. So everybody tap your mic, whoop, whoop, and invite Kenya to the CEO School classroom. I see all those mics tapping. Kenya, you can't see it, but they're all tapping those mics. Tapping those mics.
I appreciate it.
Can you guys hear Kenya? Say mic check, Kenya.
Mic check, mic check.
Can you guys hear her?
I can hear her just clear, yes.
Yes, yeah, we can hear her.
Fantastic. Woo. So let's just jump on in, Kenya, because your resume obviously is incredible, but I think what's more incredible is kind of your story and how you ended up in this like amazing opportunity in the first place. What made you decide that you wanted to just kind of go for it and go for an internship at NPR in 2007, and now you're the boss of everybody? So let's talk about that.
Yeah, so this is my third career actually. And so when it says I was an intern in 2007, that is true, but I was a very unconventional intern. I was
right. Way overqualified.
I was 32, married with 2 babies in tow. And I kind of just went on leap of faith, a wing and a prayer to take this stipend summer NPR internship job because I knew I wanted to get back into journalism. And when I say back into journalism, that's because that was my major. I went to the University of Notre Dame, and they didn't quite have the journalism major, but they had a minor, but I knew that's what I wanted to do. I went into journalism for a quick second in Atlanta, working at one of those Black weekly community papers, which meant everybody there was maybe 65, 70 or older. They were probably the same people who started the paper when it first started. And I was just really out of my element. I think I was more excited to be in Atlanta than actually, at 21 or 22, than actually work in journalism. So I went back home to California, and I actually went into entertainment PR as my first real job out of college. And I started as an assistant at a publicity company, and then worked my way up to being a film publicist in about 5 years. And then really, for those who may be in entertainment and love it, kudos to you. I was in entertainment and hated it and had to get out. And there's probably some of you who've been there too. And so I left marketing and PR and all that all together and did a full 180 and went into financial services. I worked for Sun America, which eventually became AIG, some of the Eli Bro companies, and so like a customer service manager, and I worked in financial and corporate world in that way. And that's really where I got my management experience. And then I stayed home for 2 to 3 years with my kids. I got married, I had kids, and I was a stay-at-home mom. And so when I wanted to go back, we moved back to LA, and I had to go back to work. I couldn't be a stay-at-home mom in LA. It was too expensive. And my husband was an artist, so we was broke. And so I had to go get a job. And I knew if I had to leave my baby, then I should be doing it for what I really wanted to do and what I love to do. And that was journalism, a good, 15, 17, 20 years later. And so I was trying to get some jobs, and I had these, newspaper clippings from it was 2006, 2007. I had newspaper clippings from 1994 when I was on the Notre Dame Observer newspaper, and that was not cutting it. And so I went to grad school, and I really just went to grad school so I could get an internship, because I knew that's how you could get an internship. And that was kind of the path. And then NPR came along the next summer. My goal was to get an internship, and that's what I did. And I kind of said, the master's or the internship, whichever comes first. And they both kind of came at the same time, so I just went with it. And from there, I just stayed at NPR. I've been there, as Lainika said, since 2007, and I have risen in that time, in that 13 to 14 years.
Not just risen, like you just flew, like you just.
I kind of climbed the ladder a little fast.
Yeah.
But you know what I would say, and I would assume that there's probably some people making some life changes and taking some leaps and maybe doing some startups, much like you did. And one thing that I would say, when I first got to NPR again at 32 and looking at all these, at that point, kids, I would say in the back of my head, oh, look at all these kids coming in from college, and they got here and they know it, and they're so smart, and they're so fast at the cutting and the tape and the producing and field producing. I kind of, in the back of my head, was like, man, I wish I had done that. I wish I knew that this is where I wanted to be when I first got out of school. But the truth of the matter is, everything that I did up until that time, yes, I had to get the journalism down. I had to get the producing down. But once I had that, and once I was excellent at that, all of the other came to space. So then my management experience, my customer service experience, my publicity experience, it all came to the surface. And suddenly I was not just another producer anymore. That was in line with the other people, 10 years, 15 years younger than me that came in at that same time. And so, I think a lot of my rise had to do with these other careers that quite honestly had nothing to do with it. But I brought that project management skills with me.
Yes.
I brought the ability to those complex layers of working so many different areas in publicity and so many managing people, managing feelings, managing audience and clients and managers and all that at the same time. And once I was able to bring that into my role, it flew. I went from intern to associate producer to producer two, to editor, to manager, to executive producer, and now in the executive level of the entire newsroom. So
incredible.
And I love what I do.
Yes.
And I'm good at what I do. I had to recognize at some point I am. Can we?
Yes, we can be real. Here? No, we're not censoring here.
I am a kick-ass producer, and I knew that I was. Once I was able to own that and bring it, and saw also not only my worth to myself, but my worth to my company, and knew that I had a place and a voice and that they needed that, you really start to come into your own when you can embrace that. And then you just really do what you do without any inhibitions, with great confidence, and that just propels you even further. And you know, am I ambitious? Am I aggressive at times? Sure, I'm all that, but more than anything, I believe in what I do, and I know that I'm good at what I do, and that just keeps me moving forward in a different pace, at a different pace and a different step than I maybe was when I didn't have that confidence of what I was doing, and also than others, quite honestly.
Yes. And you know, it's interesting because you touched on a lot of things that I have found to be kind of the keys to my success, you know, depending on what you determine as success. But for me, it was continuously learning, right? And I always say I'm a lifelong learner. That is why I started CEO School, because not only am I a lifelong learner, I really believe other people should be as well. And so every place I've ever been, I learned something new, and I make it my goal to learn something new so that I can bring it with me wherever I go, right? Because life is a journey, and along this journey, we are going to we're going to come up against different challenges, but we have this tool belt, right, attached to us, and all of these tools we picked up along the way, and we may not need a hammer today, but in 2 years, we may need that hammer for that problem that we're going to solve that we picked up 2 years ago. So this is everything that you're saying is right in line with everything that we believe and why we do CEO School. And I'm super excited. If you guys have been in CEO School before, you know you need to have a pen and paper. I've noticed that other rooms are starting to say these same things. You got to have a pen and paper. I'm telling you guys, you need to have a pen and paper when you come to CEO School, because this is straight real education from real people. So we're going to get started, because I've asked Kenya, what are the 3 main things that you guys need to know when you are pitching your business to the media, and how to not pitch? So Kenya sent me 3 things, and I'm going to ask her to tell me what those 3 things are again, and then we're going to move through them. And I hope you guys stay with us, and I hope you ping some other people into the room so that they can get this information too. And if you are new to CEO School, the way that we do it with our experts is that for the first 30 to 45 minutes, we are here in Fanbase in the audio room. And then after that, we move into the private subscriber room. So if you are a subscriber, you can come into the subscriber room. You still have time to subscribe now. You can go to the link in my bio and choose the CEO School private Zoom room. And you can subscribe that way. So let's get started. What are the 3 main points of pitching your business to the media that you want to share with us today?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this because this is a different, normally I talk to a room full of journalists or students. So I had to think about, how do I want to frame this? So I think what's really important, some of my publicity background will come into this. What's really important, the 3 things I think that you should know as you are pitching yourself, particularly as a business, you have to know your news outlet and know your audience. And we can talk about that more. The worst pitches I get are from the people, not necessarily there's anything wrong with their business, but you should know NPR wasn't going to take that pitch from the beginning.
Right.
So know who you are pitching to. And then moving from that, recognize that nobody in the news business is trying to offer you a promotional spot. This is not a commercial. This is not an endorsement. This is not free advertisement. So you really have to think about, how do you make yourself relevant to the news outlet or person you're pitching? And the third story, and kind of the final arc of this, is what is your story? How do you make people care about not necessarily your business, but you and what you're trying to achieve? So those are 3 things I think we can tackle.
Fantastic. So if you guys are taking notes, and remember, this is CEO School material. If you are recording or you're taking notes, make sure that you credit CEO School. Number 1, know your news outlet. Number 2, recognize that no one in the news business is there to promote your business. It's not an advertisement. And number 3, what is your story and how do you make people care? So we're going to jump into the first one, know your news outlet. So let's talk let's talk about that. So when you say know your news outlet, give me an example of what people do wrong and then what people do right.
Absolutely. So I think the biggest thing to know, and if you're not in media, you may not know this, but we are not all created equal. And so, pitching to NPR, pitching to Good Morning America, pitching to CNN, pitching to your local news channel or news magazine, your local newspaper is all going to be very different. And so this is about doing the research. You cannot pitch us all the same because we are not going to accept it all the same. We can tell when you're pitching us all the same, and you have to tailor it to where you belong. And then once you do your research, you can say, you know what, this is not the right one for me. So, I get a lot of businesses, particularly when I was on the show side and taking pitches, and recognize that people in my role, producers, journalists, reporters, depending on what your lane is, we get 100, 150 pitches a day.
Wow.
So I'm going to tell you right now, I press the X button on most of them. I don't have time for most of it. And so I can tell from your subject head whether I need to look at it. Or two things that I'm going to do. Am I even going to open it, or I'm just pressing delete so it's out of my inbox? Am I going to forward it on to someone who is more suited for that? So when I get book proposals, music pitches, I forward it on to the people who work in that space instead. Or am I going to open it and looking at and say, let me see what they have to talk about and if it's relevant to what I say. So even your subject head makes a difference, because not only do we get those 100 pitches, we also get 100 emails from our newsroom, and we're trying to clear out our inbox as fast as we can. So be real clear about even your subject heading makes a difference. And again, understanding, just because I'm the executive producer at Morning Edition, you might think, oh, this is who I want to get to. If you are Trashlogic and you want to get to NPR, you are best suited to go to maybe the business desk instead, maybe the environmental desk instead, rather than a general person. Don't just look at a list and go to a general person and figure out, there's beat reporters everywhere at every organization. Who is a person that is most likely interested in your lane? What lane does your business fall in? And who's the person who's head of that lane, right? Like I said, sometimes I will, if I think it's relevant, forward it on to the editor or the beat reporter who covers that topic. So what is your topic, and how do I find the person that is interested in my specific topic, my specific business lane?
I think that's really important what you said. She said that there's a beat reporter in almost every outlet. So a lot of people will just blindly send, and have you seen this? They send the pitch to everyone that they find.
Everybody.
And everybody gets the same thing. So what does that say when you get that, when you notice that they've sent it to everybody in the organization?
That's right. And it's, in some ways I might, and sometimes we're sending each other the same pitch, be like, this might be for you, this might be for you. But we can, because we get so many, know that we can tell when you either haven't done your research, or you haven't narrowed it down, or you're sending it to everybody.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to do what everybody else is going to do. My whole thing is how, so what you want to do is, how are you going to distinguish yourself from the others, and how are you going to stand out to the person you're pitching to? And one of the only ways that you can do that, just like you tailor your resume to the company you're sending it to and to the person you're sending it to, it is the same with media. If you want to leverage yourself, you've got to do a little bit of extra work. And when I say know your outlet, and some businesses who come forward and know that it's a stretch, quite honestly, for news to take businesses. We're in it for news. There might be some consumer outlets. There might be some people focus, the morning shows and stuff like that are more aligned to it. But most of the media is in it for the news. And so when I have someone pitching me a purse that plugs in and charges your iPhone at Disneyland, that's cool. That sounds cute, but I can't do anything with that on Morning Edition.
Right.
That's not anything. There's no news value to that. So what is the news value of your business? And
Hold on. Did you hear that? Did you hear that, Janine? You can make your purses plug in so that people can charge their phones at Disneyland. Did you hear that?
I sure did.
Listen, I got a sample and I used it and it was good, but I didn't put it on my shelf.
All right. Sorry about that. So, okay, let's keep it moving. So, sorry, you guys, I muted you instead of myself. So let's keep it moving. So knowing your news outlet, you guys got that, right? Everybody got that? Tap your mic if you guys understood what she was telling you. All right. Does anybody have a question? I'll take one question before we move on just that, not just a general question on knowing your news outlet. Anybody have a question? No? Okay, we're going to move on. Oh, Hayes, did you have a question?
I did have a question.
Hayes is in the room.
Hayes, hey girl, hey.
Can you believe it?
Whoop, whoop. All right, so Hayes, so you guys, I told you guys yesterday that these are my friends. My friends are phenomenal, right? I told y'all, y'all don't believe me. Hayes is another one of my friends. Hayes knows Kenya too. So I don't know if I should have said that, Hayes, but I wanted to tell everybody because I just love my friends. So Hayes, what's your question?
We love you too. Okay, so Kenya, you said, and it stood out to me, and I thought, you said that you can tell by the subject head whether or not it's worth your time opening up. What goes into making a good subject head?
Good question.
That's a great question. And it'll actually lead to number 2 at the same time. So one of the best things that you can do is how do you tailor what you're pitching to what I need to know right now? So, Hayes, I know you, and yes, a lot of us are friends, but we don't talk business a whole bunch. So the fact that we show up in the same space, in the business space and in the leader space is a beautiful thing.
Yes.
Because it shows that we're doing our own thing despite, in addition to our friendship. So, but I do know, I know what Hayes does. I know that she works in the doula space, in birthing, in wellness, all the things that I can think of. So, when you start to see, I'm going to be very specific to Hayes, but think about this, each of you in your own business. When you start to see something spike in your lane, when you start to see Black mothers are dying at a higher rate in childbirth, and this suddenly your business, what you do, the knowledge you have is very relevant, right? That's a big news story that suddenly is getting a lot of news play. We did it at NPR, the Washington Post did it, several others did it. Then you can start to say, how do I tailor what I do to that news story? And now you're very relevant. So your subject head says something about, Black maternal deaths high, so I'm seeing the news value. I would put it's not pitching you in the storyline, it's pitching your relevance in the storyline. Because now, as an editor, as an EP of a show who has been in this lane and seen this, I see, I'm really interested in the Black maternal death. Let me see what this email has to say. Does that make sense?
Got it.
Yes, that's so relevant. Thank you so much, Hayes, for your question, because I think most people in here probably had that question when you made the comment about the subject head. Just for me, it's been a challenge for me to pitch news outlets because I did morning like a fluff morning show for 7 years, right? So most of the pitches that I would give were around showing something off and selling it to the audience, right? It's like, so for instance, Sarah Lee was my client. So I would pitch that I could teach your audience how to organize breakfast so that the kids can make it for themselves. And that was cool for a fluffy morning show, right? That did cooking segments and things like that. It's not going to work for a news outlet. So, it goes back to what she was saying. So going back to recognizing that no one wants to promote your business. Let's really get into that, Kenya. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Exactly. And I'm just actually flipping through some of my deleted items, but some of my pitches that are sitting in there and things that maybe would have caught my eye or would have worked. You know, a lot of people start out with new investigation, you know, top retail news, you know, something again for my lane being in horror news and not such fluff as Lainika was saying. What are those key words that work to be able to bring that to my attention? But again, new investigation, hedge funds cash out $2 billion in PG&E stock. But send that to the business person. I don't. That's not my job. That's, you know, I'm not going to put anything. That's not something that I'm going to be interested in right away, because I have a business desk and I have 4 or 5 people who work specifically in that. They're more likely to open that than I am. So just to kind of give a real time example right there. That's and incredible. So when I say, what was our next one, Lainika? We said more relevant, and oh yes, it's not a promotional spot.
Yeah.
So understand that, and even in the fluff, even in the morning show, even though when we're trying to have fun and there's more consumer, you cannot pitch your business with language that makes it seem like you are trying to promote your business, right? So again, I just said something, you know, what is your news value? If we're talking about Trashlogic, you know, the best trash, we're keep it clean, you know, this, that, you know, top 10 in Sacramento and in Virginia, customers say, you know, that's not going to mean anything to you, because I'm not there to promote, to endorse. Most organizations, even the fluff, try to keep it. I'm never going to bring on, well, this is the best trash business
right.
the company in the business. That's not mine to say.
Yeah.
I'm never going to show bias. It doesn't matter whether you're fluff or not. You're not going to show bias or something. You're not going to sound like you're endorsing something. And so you really need to make sure that that's not what you are putting out there. And in fact, there are some times where people at my pitch table, producers or editors or reporters, have pitched me something, and I say, but how do we not make that sound promotional? How is that not about the business? And what is the story behind it, right? So understand when you're doing your language, you're not trying to promote yourself. You need to make yourself relevant to the story at hand. Just like we were talking about, some of the best pitches I get, whether I do them or not, but at least I know they've done their work. Ukraine is a very big news story right now. Do you know what all book publicists are doing right now? I don't care if your book is about how to grow daisies and how to watch the butterflies. They are trying to find a way to make that book relevant to Ukraine and Russia, some kind of way. And so you'll see the tagline, this is happening in Russia, this is happening in Ukraine, the war, the Biden administration, and some kind of way it's going to lead to sunflower seeds are at risk because of what's happening. And this book about how to grow sunflowers, but they did their work, right? Whether it really worked or not, or whether I'm going to take it or not, they found a way to make that book relevant to the current news story at hand. And I can venture that most of you, no matter what you are doing right now, can look at maybe the top 5 news stories and figure out, how can I make this relatable to what I do? How can I pitch what I do, my business, my story in this news story, and start to make a connection? Because while it may be a stretch, you never know what we're looking for. You never know what angle we're looking for, particularly when we've done a story, what we call news cycles, particularly when we've done ourselves a story so many times, we're looking for different angles all the time. We're looking for, how do we tell this story differently? What is the new voice that I have in this? So Trashlogic, you know, thinking about, that's an environmental story right there. There's so many environmental spaces to talk about and to make it, every time the EPA comes out with a new rule, every time some new legislation happens, there is a pitch right around the corner for Trashlogic to be able to include in that.
You know, I'm writing all this down, right? So I can write my pitches.
So, you may think that's so far, something that the Biden administration did is so far infrastructure. I heard someone mention, they're in the music business, and all the Grammys just happened, everything that just happened with the Oscars, your entertainment base. You may think some of that stuff is so far from what you are doing, but the connections that can be made and how you see yourself, how you leverage yourself as an expert in that story is really what starts to make the correlation happen for news reporters.
Fantastic. All right, y'all. So let's keep it rocking. Let's keep it rolling. We left off on how do you tailor what you're pitching when something spikes in the news in your lane? Know how you're relevant. So we'll just pick up there. So back to you, Kenya. Thank you once again for being a CEO School to reset the room. This is the subscriber only Zoom room. We have ended the Fanbase session, and we are now subscriber only. So let's get back into it. Kenya, you have the floor.
Well, thank you. And before we get started, because I'm just going to move on to 3, are there any questions out there?
And you guys feel free to open your mic if you have a question.
I do have a question. This is William Carroll.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I actually tried to reach out to many news organizations for my product. I was curious. You threw out a really good point. It's like if you can somehow tie your product or service with the events that are happening in the news cycle, like the Ukrainian, like you said, sunflower seeds. Would it be smart to actually have a template that you use, like hurricane season? Normally, there's a storm that comes through and messes up everybody's power grid.
Mm-hmm.
Like, would you have content already available for those events and then send it out when those events happen? Is that a good idea, or would you craft it at the moment?
I think you could have somewhat of a template, but of course, just like we were talking about cover letters, when that moment comes. So probably what'll happen over time, right? You start doing it more and more. There's those that you can save, and you can, if your business is related, as you said, like a hurricane is something you see, like, these are always something I can tag onto some kind of way. And now it's Hurricane Ida compared to Hurricane Irene a couple years ago, whatever. You'll obviously want to tailor it to what may be specific about this one. That is, so a template with some crafting is what I would probably say. But particularly if you know that there is, from time to time, every time this happens, I know that I can try to pitch myself. So let me just kind of have this one at the side and at the bay, so I can form it to the moment at hand. Yeah.
All right. Did that answer your question, Will?
Yeah. No, that's thank you.
You're welcome.
And so, I think where this really goes is my last point, which is, how do I make people care? And not only is this a point in this session here, I probably said that at my table. When I say table, that was my pitch table that I ran every single meeting, where my, the producers and editors and hosts and reporters would come to the table and pitch the ideas for the show that day or the next day, or even long term. And someone would pitch something, sometimes obscure. Sometimes I'd always hear, I'm really interested in hearing about that. And it'd be very particular to their interest. And I've got to say, I had an audience of 13 million people. I have to think about those people. And how do I put something on that makes the majority of the people care about what they're listening to? And I've got to think about clickability. So when you're writing your stuff, I've got to think about audience. I've got to think about keeping audience. I've got to think about them not clicking off. We used to say not turning down the dial or turn the channel. It doesn't happen that way anymore in car radios. But I'm thinking of all those things when I'm thinking about what I put on my show the next day. And so I used to call it the on-ramp. What is the on-ramp to this story that makes people want to listen, read, continue the podcast, whatever the case may be? And so that, why do I care? If you're giving me this or not why do I care, make me care, right? Because I think that everything that you have, if you care about it, someone else probably cares about it, but make me care. What is that on-ramp? And so that's when I talked about what are the news stories out there? What is the outcome that if you back time it, right? What's the outcome that's relevant to a national audience, to your local audience? What's the outcome? And then back time that to what it is that you do. And so really the crux of all that is like, what is your story? This isn't about your business. This isn't about, and it could be the story of the business. Lainika has a story. She has a story in Trashlogic, but she also has a personal story to tell as a Black woman CEO in this male-dominated space, starting a new, like all the different things, right? You could tailor it to a lot of different things. But a perfect example is a music interview. And at some point, maybe about 5-6 years ago, I completely revamped how we were doing music interviews on the show, because people were pitching, I have a new CD coming out. So, of course, someone wants to do it. That's what their publicist is going to do, right? My new CD, and, commercial radio, maybe that's morning shows on the Power 106, and the other ones will do that. Sure, that's fine. For a news organization, for a media organization, sitting here saying, okay, so, I don't know, who can I say? Nas, whoever, right? Tell me about track number 4, blah, blah, blah. Tell me about track number 7, blah, blah, blah. Tell me about track number 11. That's how our interviews were going. And they were the pit. It was ridiculous. And sometimes you get into some interesting stuff. And I totally revamped them to be like, tell me this, what is the story this person has to tell? And then the music is the backdrop to that story, right? This isn't a music interview. This is an artist interview. And the music just kind of is the bridge and helps support and tell that story more. And that's what really matters. That is true for music. It's true for business. It's true for books. Everything that someone put on the table, I would say back, but what is the story we are going to hear? And if you have a really good story to tell, it doesn't really matter what your business is. It's about your story, and the business is a backdrop to your story. And that's where you really get into pitching. That's where you really get into reporters, producers, other artists, what have you, getting interested in what you're doing. Because what is the story that you can tell about yourself or about your business that will resonate with other people, that will resonate in this news story, that will resonate with an audience? When I'm thinking about my audience, I have to think about the 65-year-old white male farmer in Montana on his tractor. And I have to think about the 23-year-old Latino walking from NYU home to their flat in the Bronx. And I have to think about the mom who's leaving the park, in South Carolina with her 4 kids, right? Like, how am I going to appeal to that many different people? And you can. A lot of people are like, oh, well, no, that Nas story isn't for that farmer. If it's a really good story, it is for that farmer. If there's something to really anchor into, because it becomes about the storytelling, it doesn't become about that person's music, that a lot of people may not think that is for them. But the story, the interest, what you are telling, that's what becomes interested in. And then your business is a part of that story. And that's really how you start to resonate with media. Because what was the thing I said at the very top? We're not here to promote you. We're not here to endorse you. We're not here to give you a platform to talk about your business. That's what Shark Tank and all these others are for, right? That's not what we do. We're here to hear your story, and your business becomes a part of that story. And that's how you really get your foot in the door with media.
Right. That is so pertinent to understand, because as Will was saying, a lot of times as a business owner, first of all, you don't have PR experience, so you don't know how to pitch. Right. And because most people are interested in themselves, they pitch themselves, right? They don't think about what's going on in the world and what will other people care about.
That's right.
So I do want to open up the floor to our subscribers. Welcome, everybody. Everybody I haven't spoken to today. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And let you ask questions. We have about 15 more minutes with Kenya, and then she has another meeting to get to. So if you have a question, go ahead and unmute your mic. And I'm going to open up the gallery because I can't move the video up here. All right. So Khadijah, are you there? I see your mic is unmuted, but I'm not sure if that's just because you're having audio issues or if you had a question.
Oh, hello. Good morning.
Good morning.
No, I every time I come in here, I forget that it automatically sets it to unmute.
Okay.
I always forget to mute when I come in. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
But everything that you're saying, it does make a lot of sense, Miss Kenya. I appreciate the value that you're giving us this morning. And it makes sense because in the same way that us business owners are like, okay, what can I get out of this going to the news? We clearly understand that what we can get out of the situation is publicity and eyes on our business or our service.
Mm-hmm.
But from your standpoint, from the network standpoint, it's like, well, what are we getting out of this? Okay, thanks. That's great. You're a Black-owned business. This is wonderful for you. But
what's our audience going to get? Where's the value for the audience?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then, so Khadijah, what's your business?
My business is, I own a business called 27th and Rose. It is a self-care resource library dedicated to helping millennials explore themselves deeply, accept themselves fully, and embrace themselves lovingly each day.
Okay. Before Kenya goes in, real quick, you didn't tell her what your business was. So I understand that is the pitch that you've crafted. But and this is me as your coach, right? As your unofficial coach. Kenya, do you know what she does from that?
I'm assuming it sounds like it's a wellness. I didn't get the library part, but it sounds like it's geared towards wellness for millennials.
Yeah. So what is it that you do?
What I do, I'm a writer. I write affirmations on courage, confidence, and self-love because I have found from firsthand experience just how powerful and impactful self-talk is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So just think off the top of my head, just even with those top lines, you had an opportunity in the pandemic because it sounds like you're dealing a lot with mental health. That was a huge topic in news in the pandemic. It was a huge topic when we were talking about education. It was a huge topic if you're talking about millennials, when we were talking about college and kids not going to college, and either not going or being at home, and some of the mental angst that they were going through during that time. You have a huge opportunity in a business lane because there's so much talk about millennials and how they relate in the corporate world, right? Old fogies like me, and then the millennial generation, where managers are always talking about, we don't know how to coach this millennial generation, but millennials aren't feeling heard or included, right? So there's an opportunity here about, in millennials in the corporate space and how they're dealing with corporate work situations, how they're obviously during the time of the racial reckoning and the protests and the past 2 years of being in the streets after George Floyd, that was run by millennials practically. That whole movement changed and shifted to the millennial space, taking over that space. So right there, and again, this is not exactly knowing, how you're tailoring yourself or what you're doing, but it sounds like you can position yourself as an expert in mental health, pandemic, school education, college, racial unrest, because all of that is, you're speaking to the topic. And then again, your business is illustrated as a part of it, right? So I'm not going to come to you and say, okay, let me talk about your business and how you help millennials with this and how we talk about the writing of the affirmation. Tell me what you do. That's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about the issues at hand. I'm going to craft a script and interview you questions on what's going on in this space You are going to be the expert at it. And then talk about how how affirmation is changing the way in which millennials sees themselves, blah, 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 blah. And at the end, I'm just going to be like, Khadija, my screen moved. I don't know your last name. Where'd you go? Khadija Amari is a writer of the book such and such, and has this company, right? That's the only place really your business comes in, because people don't care about your business. They care about what you do. They care about the outcome. And if they're interested in what you've had to say, they will then go Google your business and figure out how they can become a part of it. That's the difference with media.
Yes. That was so good. That was so good. Thank you so much. Did that help you, Khadija?
Yes, it was very helpful. I think that I didn't know that when you asked me the question, what's your business, that I should have responded first with my personal introduction and then what my business is. I went straight into what my business is. So that was even helpful on that area.
And I was just asking what your business is because I wanted to think about, some kind of real life practical things and give it to you. But the truth of the matter is, you wouldn't pitch with what your business is. That's going to lose me immediately. You're going to pitch with what you do and how it relates to the story at hand, right? There's a mass shooting at a nightclub and 13 millennials were killed. You better write somebody and tell them that you're an expert to talk about this and tell them about how you handled. And then suddenly there's a conversation with you in it, speaking to what happened in Atlanta, Georgia with these 13 millennials, God forbid, that died, blah, blah, blah. And suddenly it's about your expertise. So really what you're pitching, you guys, is your expertise.
Yes.
And your business is tangential or supplementary to your expertise.
Right. So, and the reason that I interrupted you, Khadija, it wasn't, specifically for you. It's for everyone to understand that pitches are not all equal, right? So we pitch our business to our customers. And so we craft these pitches that we, so that we can get business. But it's not the same as pitching media. So a lot of times we start to craft these pitches and think that's our pitch. Like that's our pitch for everything. But just like when you are interviewing for a job, right? You tailor your resume and your cover letter for each job that you're going to, and what they're going to care about is going to be different. So what Starbucks cares about is different than what Tesla cares about. So it's the same thing with pitches. You're going to pitch your customer one way and pitch the media a different way. So that's why I wanted to make that separation that, I heard your pitch and it's a very well crafted pitch, right? It's going to get a customer to say, oh, tell me more about that. And how do you do that? Right. But it's not the same when somebody in the news media says, oh, what do you do? You can't lead with, oh, I am a blah, blah, da, 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 and then they're lost. They don't know what you're, what you're talking about. And then even for me, right? So I know what you do. And that's why I could read between the lines with what you said, because I know what you do. But make sure that the person doesn't have questions about what you do. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. Okay.
And with the media, it really truly is about, why does this matter?
Yeah.
Why does this matter? Why do I need to go tell your story? So if I'm thinking about Natasha and what Natasha does and thinking, and if she's going to come to me and pitch to me, and hey girl, hey, and we're going to go through all that. Because listen, I have there have been plenty of friends on the air, and I put them on there because I got some badass friends and they do some badass stuff, but it's also because what they did was relevant and what they did mattered in the state and needed and should be heard by other people, right? And so, if I'm thinking about Natasha and what Natasha is, about the business that she's working in, she's not going to pitch to me cannabis. What she's going to pitch to me is that, traditionally Blacks are 20% behind the white population that's gone into this business. That nowhere in the South, except for South Carolina, are there 3 Black-owned businesses. And I'm making this stuff up, don't quote me. But I'm thinking about her lane, right?
I was already taking notes.
Yeah. there's only 3 Black women in South Carolina, or not only, there are 3, Black women in South Carolina that have taken over the business. They run the empire, blah, blah, blah. Like that's a feel-good story. That's something different than what's out there. She's pitching to me things that are happening in her space that are of interest and that could be relevant and says something about this. What does it say about this business that there are equally Blacks and whites in this business, but Blacks are making the millions, and the whites are making the millions in cannabis, but Blacks are making the thousands, right? Like there's something there. How do we talk about inequities in cannabis? That's been a news story for 50 years. It continues to be as it becomes legal and people are legally going into this business. So, she's not going to pitch, here's what I can do for you, and here's what Cannabis does, and we consult. That will never make it on anywhere. She has stories within her lane and her business. And the fact that she's a consultant with these people trying to change the gap and shift that news that is in her face, that's her story. That's why it matters. That's what is impacting and having effective change in society. That's what it's about. And the business is just a part of that story.
That's incredible. Yeah, go ahead, Khadijah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It like tied it all together for me mentally. So thank you so much for that example, that analogy. A question that I have from that is, I know that there's a difference between like an evergreen story and like, this is very much a now story. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's going to matter for us business owners when we're trying to get into the media? Mm-hmm. For who wants to do a now, like a very timely, or are we able to sort of get in the door with those evergreen type stories?
So the thing with the evergreens is even the evergreens have to be relevant, right? There are evergreens that are interesting. It's a story we want to hear, but why do we want to hear it? Yes, that's interesting. But another phrase that I have at the table all the time, why now?
Why now?
Michelle Martin is an illustrious award-winning Black woman host. She's so good if you've not heard her before. But when I was her executive producer, almost unequivocally every day at the pitch table, why this story at this time with this person, right? I would often just say, why now? So even in the evergreen space, it doesn't have to be tagged to what happened that morning or the next day. Yes, that helps with relevancy. But even in an evergreen situation, find your why now. And there may not be, you may be making up the why now, right? But it's kind of that agenda. How are you agenda setting with your pitch? How are you making, how you can make it relevant without it being tied directly to the news. Being tied directly to a news is just an easy way in. But even in an evergreen, I have to ask, well, why would I put that show on tomorrow? Why are we talking about that now, right? And you need to be able to speak to that. Here's why this matters.
So I wanted to, because we only have a few more minutes left, I wanted to real quick, because I think of people like Janine, who is a handbag maker. What kinds of stories, could she pitch that don't sound like a promotional story, or like she's, just trying to pitch her, her handbags?
Mm-hmm. Janine would need to find the stories that she can be seen as an expert voice in. There are fashion stories out there. We did in the pandemic, we did several stories about how people are dressing now and how you get back into the workplace. And, I haven't worn shoes. I've worn Birkenstock and leggings for 2 years now. How am I going to go back into the office, right? So there were fashion stories even attached to the pandemic.
Like how much people are shopping online versus before, things like that.
Yeah, things like that. And yeah, so you become more of a expert on consumer, on consumer practices, on fashion, on in this case, women getting back into the workplace and why that stuff kind of matters, what's important. You could even be in the self-paced care, self-care, right? The truth of the matter is, with a business on handbags, you are going to position yourself as an expert or find a story that you can be a part of. And in the end, it's just going to be Janine McQueen is the owner of McQueen Handbags out of Atlanta, Georgia, or whatever, right? You want the interest to be on you, and then they have to go do the work to find you, true to form. But the interest is on you and what you're talking about, so that they do go find you. And so,
Fantastic.
what stories can you be a part of? What layouts can you be a part of that you position yourself as a talker on it, as, you know, and you know, yes, we're news, but we do fun stuff. We have roundtables of, you know, and also, of course, I'm assuming, aside from where'd Will go? Will's in here. You know, black business owners. We had a time. There was a time during the pandemic. I had a segment on the rise. What did we call it when we were, you know, it was the blackout, or we're only buying from black business owners, only black books. You know, I had several segments. So just positioning yourself as a Black woman in the fashion industry where there's not that many of you. Yeah, Black Susie, right. That's your story. What you do, what you produce is just a little blip in it, but all of you should be positioning yourself as a Black business owner in a field, most likely, that where, you know, you're either, your presence is new, you're changing the face of that business, you're, you know, it's a predominantly white, predominantly male, whichever it may be. How do you position yourself as being a thought leader in your space? Then people want to talk to you.
Yes, this has been so incredible, Kenya. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. So when I come to CEO school, I'm a student. I just come to learn too. And so having such, look at Hayes, you can see the chat. Just having just people of your caliber and someone like you here is just so valuable, because you're not a person that most people have access to, right? To tell them the truth about what happens when they send you a garbage, you know, pitch, right? It's just, they just send it and it's blind and they don't know. But now you guys know what happens when you send in pitches and it's just, you know, you're just talking about yourself. So thank you, Kenya, so much for being here. You brought so much value to the CEO School
It was
classroom
great. It was
today.
really great to hear more about you guys. And, you know, if I leave you with anything, I think it's what Khadijah picked up on. Think about, you have to put yourself in the space of the reporter, the producer, the news executive, whatever. What do they need to do? What is their job, and how do you fill a void or a need in what they're doing in their daily job that day? That's how you're going to get in. They are thinking about their audience, and they're thinking about their show or their paper, and where do you fit in that, in their daily job of trying to fulfill that.
Fantastic.
That's how you position yourself.
That was amazing. So Kenya's final thought is, think about the person you're pitching and what their job is and how you can fill that void. So thank you, Kenya. And thank you for giving us your time. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.